Uh, good night, it was way back in the 1940s. There was a little kid here in cabin 3.
Yeah!
Yeah.
What's up?
And you think cabin 3 is not sharp. This kid was named Johnny. And Johnny heard this Sunday morning message. And he got it. And y'all, they gave Johnny a card. Uncle Bill Lance was the guy that was doing Kanakuk in those days. And he gave Johnny a card. And this was it. It was just like this one. And it said, I'm third. God first, others second, and I'm third. And Johnny took the card and he kept it. And you know when somebody's I'm third, they're the best person in camp. Every time I come over here, I see Chris and Diane, and Joel and Kelly, and Matt and Liz, and I just see these I'm third people. And it's why K1 is just, it's why you're here. Because I'm third people are the greatest people on earth. Because they put God first in everything. They always put the other person second. They put themselves third. And Johnny got it. Well, you guys, Johnny became a great athlete. He was a running back for the Colorado State University football team. And then he began to fly jet airplanes. In fact, he flew the F-86 Sabre jet. It was the fastest jet that the U.S. had in those days. And Johnny was befriended by everybody because he always put the other pilots first. And he would risk his life often, the reports now we have gathered say, to save the lives of other people. Even when he put his own life in jeopardy. Well, after the war he fought in, where he was highly decorated for saving other pilots' lives, Johnny joined a team called the Minutemen. And the Minutemen was 4 F-86 Sabre jets. Johnny was one of the 4 pilots. And you guys, they would go around the country in these great air shows. And they would perform these heroic deeds. Have y'all ever seen the Thunderbirds? They're just unbelievable. They fly over, these airports and crowds, and they just do stuff you can't believe an airplane could do. Well, that's what Johnny did. And on one day, in fact, it was about 50 years ago. Johnny and his plane and his 3 friends were flying up at Dayton, Ohio, at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. There were 100,000 people out that day. And they were just standing in awe as these 4 planes flew straight over their heads, almost wingtip to wingtip. They were just like they were one plane. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the crowd, all 4 planes just stood on their afterburners, shooting straight up into the sky. Blue smoke coming out of the back of their planes. Gorgeous sight. Then at 7,000 feet, Johnny's plane took a screaming left turn. And his buddy, Major Win Coomer's plane, takes a screaming right turn. The other 2 planes, Walt Whitman, they go straight up into the sky. And everybody's looking at this giant blue flowery cross in the sky called the fleur-de-lis. Everybody's astonished. And then you read the newspaper about this day, and it says all of a sudden, the morning of beauty turned into a morning of horror. Because one of the planes was out of control. And it was Johnny. It's a true story. And Johnny's plane is diving out of control into a little suburb of Dayton called Fairborn, Ohio. And Johnny's plane is going right into a neighborhood. And the captain commands Johnny to bail out of his plane. And you guys, all Johnny has to do is push this button, and his seat jettisons, and the canopy over his head jettisons, and the parachute jettisons, and Johnny can float down to safety. But if he bails out, who's going to guide the plane? Johnny would have been a leader at this camp. I think your leaders at this camp are really the most I'm third people in all the Kanakuk camps. It's just like Johnny. And so Johnny's plane is diving into this house. And in fact, after the crash, this lady who was in the house with her little boy, she said it looked like Johnny was coming right into my living room window. She said we were looking right at each other's eyes. And then she said, then he pulled it up and he placed it there. And she pointed to a garden behind her house. It was the only spot in the town where Johnny could have placed the plane so that no one would get hurt. See, the plane was out of control, but Johnny was a great athlete, and he had the control stick. And he gave everything he had. And at the last minute, he was able to pull the plane up over the house and put it in the garden. No one was hurt. The lady fell over with the crash. The little boy fell over, but they weren't injured at all. There was only one person hurt in the crash. And it was a little cabin 3 kid who'd grown up to become a counselor, to grown up to become a hero in the war, and a hero to this day. Captain John T. Ferrier, who gave his life so that that lady and that little boy could live. He never met him until he got to heaven. And I'm sure the reunion in heaven was unbelievable as they told the story of the brave man who died for them. You know why Johnny did that? Because Johnny had a hero. And Chiefs and Princes, I can't wait for y'all to put that cross up in a minute, because Johnny's hero was the one who died on that cross that's going to go up, and it stays in this Kanakuk church all the time. His hero is a man named Jesus. Because in Philippians chapter 2, it says this about the most time third person that ever lived. It says about Jesus, it said, who although he existed in the form of God, you know, Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit are one. And even though Jesus, the Son, existed in the form of God, he did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself by taking the form of a bondservant. And being made in the likeness of man, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Johnny died instantly. It took Jesus 9 hours to die, to give you forgiveness, so that you could go to heaven when you die. Before Jesus died, y'all, if you can imagine God coming down on this earth, the most lovable man that ever lived. He even gets down on his knees the night before he dies, and he washes disciples' feet. I see this at K1 all the time in little ways. As your counselors serve you and serve you, and as you guys serve each other, and as y'all serve your counselors. K1 literally is one of the happiest places, I think, on planet Earth, because K1 gets it. Jesus watched the feet of his disciples. And then they went out like Johnny and began to find creative ways to wash others' feet. Hey, y'all, you know why God's first? Who can tell me why God is first? Yes. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Why do you put God first? Because he made us, and without him, we wouldn't even be alive. Do y'all know who made the stars? Yeah, do you know how many he made? What's 10 times 10? What's 10 times 100? What's 10 times 1,000? 10,000. A million. We'll get there in a minute. What's 10 times 10,000? Getting close. 100,000. What's 10 times 100,000? Million. Yes. What's 10 times a million? 10 million. Not yet. 10 million. What's 10 times 10 million? 100 million. What's 10 times 100 million? What? Yes, a billion. What's 10 times a billion? 10 billion. What's 10 times 10 billion? 100 billion. What's 10 times 100 billion? A trillion. Google. Not a Google yet. You guys know how many stars there are? Well, there's 100 billion galaxies. What galaxy do we live in? Milky Way. Do you know how many stars are in our galaxy? 400 billion. That's just our little galaxy, just our little piece of the universe. But there's 100 billion Milky Ways. And you know how God made those? I've studied science for 35 years. You know how he made those? He said, stars. That's all he did. Creation. I don't know how. He just said cosmos. And the whole thing just went wah out of his mind. And if you think you're not amazing, do you know that your body, watch this, y'all ready? I just got a cell off the inside of my mouth. You can take these cells, I mean everything, these are all cells, my eyes are cells, my head's cells, my shoes, everything. There's one, I could put it under a microscope, and there's more ideas in my cell than the space shuttle. Scientific fact. The space shuttle with 5 computers, the space shuttle with 16,000 scientists working to get it off the ground. Every cell in your body has more ideas than the shuttle. Princess, what's your name? Sandy, you have 100 trillion space shuttles inside of you. Do you feel smart now? He did that. He put 100 trillion space shuttles in Sandy. No wonder you guys are so brilliant. He's first. Y'all think the sun is awesome? It's a teeny weeny star. When you go out and look at stars, counselors, show your kids, show them Scorpio in the southern sky. Scorpio has one star in it that's 9,000 suns. The North Star. How many of y'all have ever seen the North Star? 1,600 suns. It's 2 trillion miles away. Crazy. God did all that. So he's first. And you know why others are second? Hey, why do you put other people second? Joel, Dolph, come here a second. You know why you put other people second? Because you watch them faint. What happens when you go home, instead of your mom making your bed, you go make her bed? You know what happens? She faints. She goes, whoa. What happens when you go home and you go to the grocery store and you take $9.99 and buy a dozen roses and give them to your mom just because she's awesome, or your dad, and you just go, you're awesome. You know what happens when you put them second? You better hold them. They're in the faint. They just go. I just went up and gave my mom a hug. My mom's 93. Went up there and just gave her a big old hug. Made my day. Just beginning. But I'm going to finish by telling you a story I heard when I was a K1 camper. Y'all, this was, wow, it's 50-something years ago. I heard this story. A story about a little girl. This little girl's 19 years old. She's not a little girl anymore, but she's 19. She's a young lady. She's at the cemetery. And she's standing in front of a statue, a marble statue of a fireman who obviously had died in a heroic act. And she was standing at the statue weeping. And somebody passed by and they said, young girl, why are you crying? She said, why am I crying? As tears flowed down her face, she said, this man died for me. Her mind went back to 15 years before as she remembered herself as a 4-year-old. She was up in an apartment building and she was on the 2nd floor, just a little 4-year-old. And she remembers looking out the window as the apartment was burning up all around her. And she watched her mom screaming out, my daughter, someone save my daughter. She remembers a fireman rushing up the ladder as the ladder was extended to her little window there. And she remembers looking in the face of this man, racing up the ladder to save her life. And as he picked her up and put her on the ladder, she said, my kitty, will you please go save my kitty? She remembers seeing the backside of the fireman going into the flames to pick up her little kitten. And as she crawled down the ladder to safety and looked back up, the apartment collapsed on the fireman. He never came out of the fire. So there she stands 15 years later looking at this statue, bawling her eyes out. And the man comes by and said, little girl, why are you crying? She said, why am I crying? This man died for me. Why do we stand at the cross and just weep sometimes? Why do we look at Jesus and sometimes we can't contain our emotions when they sing worship? And somebody says, why are you crying? And you look at Jesus and you say, why am I crying? This man died for me. And the funnest thing about K1 of all is that K1, you get to give him your heart. If you've never done that, you get to do that at K1. You get to say, Jesus, I give you my heart. Please come live inside of me. I want to be like you. And if you've ever done that before, you can do it anytime you want. You can do it now. You can do it tonight. You can close your eyes and you can say, dear Jesus, I want to be like you. Thanks for dying for me. Please come into my heart. I give my life to you. And then you begin to live a life like Johnny did. Bow your head and close your eyes with me, will you? If there's a camper here who's never given your